And welcome to Lone Star Yell Fight, where your favorite Aggie, Andy Tom Chesson, and your favorite Longhorn, James Christopher, take you deep inside the two flagship programs of Texas football.
Good morning. It is the 1st of December. This year is almost over. And as one of us predicted, at least at the very beginning of the season, one of our teams is playing in a championship game this weekend. The other team is facing its second new coach in the last 6 years. This is Lone Star Yell and Fight. I'm Andy Tom Chesson. That is James Christopher. He is in a happier place than I am because his team gets to play in the Big 12 championship game this Saturday in Dr. Pepper, Frisco, I don't know, AT&T Stadium. I forget which one of those.
I wish it was in Frisco. That'd be kind of neat. In the whole,
I know it's in a parking lot in Arlington, and there's probably still a parade and probably a shooting going on for the World Series.
Probably.
But Texas places Oklahoma State, which is a little bit different than what people were expecting at the beginning of the year.
They're trying to win a major award.
But will it be fragile, friend?
I hope so. Well, I hope not.
Is the path to a win fragile for Sarkisian and his crew?
You know me, I tend to not want to get overconfident. But look, I think they're now 12.5-point favorites.
Yep.
We all had what we thought would be the outcome. I think all of us thought it would be an Oklahoma rematch. And I think there's a part of a lot of people, those people not named me, who would prefer that. But I think it's going to be I think it's a good draw for Texas. I think that's the best you can ask for.
See, I don't understand that. Maybe it makes me less of a man. I'm certainly not the alpha that I see described on the internets. But why do you want to face the hardest opponent? Why wouldn't you want to face the easiest opponent? You're there. You're in the championship game. You earned your spot. I want a cakewalk. If I were you, I'd want to win 63-7 and hope that everything falls my way so I can make the actual playoffs that matter at this point.
Well,
why do you need the stressor? Why do fans need the stressor of facing Oklahoma again and potentially dealing with that angst?
Well, especially with when anything can go wrong in that game really quickly. I don't know why. I have no idea why. Look, would there have been a certain part of outsider karmic hilarity to watch the Big 12 championship game feature two teams that will not be in the Big 12 next year? Of course there would have. I'm really proud of my fan base's response to, well, first of all, props to whoever's running the Stadio Jumbotron for playing the Big 12 commissioner's request in August for Texas Tech to send Texas out the right way, but also for them to break right into SEC champs. First of all, for a fan base that's not always known for being the most situationally aware, that was pretty funny. I loved that.
Yeah, it's for those people who don't know what we're talking about, the commissioner of the Big 12, Yorick. I don't know his first name, and I don't really care.
Alas, poor Yorick.
Exactly. He sounds like a character from Shakespeare and or a Lord of the Rings trilogy piece that I didn't read. Maybe the Silmarillion. Maybe he's one of the 1,500 pages of the Silmarillion in there.
And there's your reference to Tolkien for today.
But he challenged or pumped up Texas Tech at the media days in July or August about putting the Longhorns in their place and showing them what for and something high school rah because Texas is daring to leave a conference that is going to have a subpar TV contract and likely will be moving their championship game to Frisco. I mean, and that would not be. Do you think Jerry Jones? But I mean, seriously, do you think Jerry Jones is going to be really pumped next year about hosting U of H versus BYU?
No.
But that's what you're talking about.
That's what you're talking about, yeah.
Baylor versus Arizona.
Yeah. No, I don't know. It's I made the joke that U of H got to play in a major conference for a year.
Kind of.
They
at least got to play two major conference games.
They did, yeah. And but they did, and I don't know. I mean, it's weird, and it's so funny to me how I think the Big 12 commissioner definitely succeeded in one thing, and that was making a lot of Longhorn fans who were on the fence about this whole thing not be on the fence about it anymore. because I don't like petty. I don't like whatever. Texas and Oklahoma had been asking the conference to improve the conference ever since A&M left. Some requests more overt than others, and they decided to finally start making some decent moves once the OU Longhorn move was imminent. Uh, Enjoy yourselves being Conference USA's counterpart.
Well, I was told that was more about Missouri leaving. Was that not accurate?
It was not accurate. Although
Um,
I would like to point out to one of our former co-hosts that Missouri, seems to have figured out the SEC pretty quickly.
well, I will say this. In the alignment that they walked into, I sure would have preferred to play in the East versus the West for the first 10 years.
Yeah,
That would have been a much nicer role, especially considering Georgia hadn't figured out how to be Georgia at that point. You really had to worry about a declining Florida, and that's about it on
that's
that
about
side.
it. Yeah.
Tennessee was in a hole for a number of years at that point. Um, so just real quick, recapping the season, you finish 11-1, or 11-1. You have a chance to
Yeah.
win 12 games this Saturday, and then at the worst, a New Year's Six bowl sometime in January. I say that New Year's Six would be on January 1st, wouldn't it? But were you comfortable throughout the season that you were going to be where you are now? Because you played Alabama, and I think most people thought that would be an upset if you won, and you did. You went on the road and won, just convincingly. Then you turn around and lose to Oklahoma, and then there was a stretch of injuries to yours and some games that were closer than they needed to be. At what point did you worry that they were going to backslide a little bit and drop a couple of games that they shouldn't?
Yeah,
If that
definitely.
happened at all.
No, I mean it did happen, and there were several games where, frankly, I won't say they should have lost because they won them. And the one thing cool thing about sports is you either will or won't. There's really not a third direction, and they won games this year that they would have lost last year. Am I worried? One thing that made the Tech game feel so much better was it was foot on the gas for 4 quarters, and we hadn't seen that since Alabama. And my hope is that's what you'll see on Saturday. But yeah, there was definitely concern, and I also tend not to get super overconfident about things because things can happen, and more often than not, in fact, things happen. So I'm definitely proud of the team. I'm definitely I don't know, we'll get to whether we think Texas is going to be in the playoff or not, but yeah, I definitely was concerned in Iowa State. I was really concerned in K-State because they hemorrhaged such a big lead, and to see them with the help of a gambler for a head coach in the across the sideline, they again won games that last year they absolutely would have lost.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Sarkisian can. I think one of the things Sarkisian does really well is script the first series of offensive plays. And typically that has meant, with a couple of exceptions, Texas gets out to a pretty quick start, or at least figures out what they want to do fairly early. But then there seems to be, at least in the second half of the season, this lull that sinks in about the middle of the second quarter and lasts until sometime in the fourth quarter, when Sarkisian remembers he can run the ball on just about anybody.
Yeah.
Um, how does he overcome that against an Oklahoma State team that has seen you already? I mean, not even a month ago, I think it was fairly recently.
Oh no,
Uh,
we haven't played Oklahoma State this year.
oh, you didn't play Oklahoma
No,
State.
no, 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 no. It was no, we haven't.
So you haven't got a full experience of I'm a man, Mike Gundy, I'm
Not this
40,
time.
all that.
No.
He's like 56 now, but
But it's a valid question. And sometimes I don't know that it's so some of it I think is a lull in the game that is inexplicable. Some of it has been, I think Sarkisian goes into an NFL clock management style football in the fourth quarter way too early. And so he's content with running, not necessarily getting first downs, getting touchdowns, but just milking enough clock that um, he's shortening the game. And I think he starts doing that a little too early. And that's what makes some of these games closer than they need to be. It's interesting because they were actually a better second half team last year than they were
right.
this year. So I don't know quite what the disconnect is. My hope is what you saw out of them versus Texas Tech, where the foot never went off the gas, was maybe the sign of Sarkisian realizing that you have to basically step on people's throats for 4 quarters in modern college football because it's too easy for teams to come back. And I'm hoping that paired with the energy of being in the Big 12 championship game, where they're heavily favored, which I guess can really go one of two ways as far as whether that's a benefit or a detriment. But my hope is that's the situation that maybe has woken him up to say, yes, keep running your full offense for 4 quarters.
Well, and we saw even outside your games this weekend what happens if you don't. Poor Auburn, poor
No,
Braves
it's so
Ashland.
sad. So
I
what?
feel bad for Braves Ashland because I know she just started drinking heavily and
Yeah,
never stopped.
that is so true. I also felt bad for Tommy Tuberville, mostly because he has to be Tommy Tuberville and look himself in the face. By the way, Tommy, I know you're not Facebook friends, but I renew my challenge to fight you at any opportunity.
I don't think Auburn associates themselves with Tommy too much anymore.
Not anymore. No.
I know Texas Tech doesn't, since he ran the check on a recruiting trip. Just got up and left and took another job.
He really did, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's an honorable man.
He really is full of integrity.
That is the word I think of.
Yeah.
Tommy Integrity Tuberville.
He's the George Santos of integrity.
So if you win, and I think we both agree that you're probably going to win this weekend, you do have
Oklahoma State can certainly put a game together that can beat us.
Sure.
Right.
I think you're favored. I think Las Vegas thinks you're favored. They tend to know what's going on and at least how the money's flowing. You out talent Oklahoma State at just about every position. And I think the key position of defensive line and the quarterback, clearly Quinn Ewers is better than anything that Tech is going to put on the field. And clearly your defensive line, if they're motivated, is going to be able to beat up on Oklahoma State's offensive line. Sure. So I think based on that, regardless of the final score, is Texas comes out with a victory. They win their 12th game for the first time since Mac Brown left, which will
be a real neat deal.
Yeah. But then you have an outside chance of making the playoffs.
Yeah.
Now, right now you're sitting at the 7th seed. I guess seed's not the right word, but you're ranked 7th in the computer rankings. A couple of things need to happen. I think we started talking about that a little bit last week, but I think the general feeling is that if Florida State and Oregon somehow lose, you're probably in.
Yeah.
And that's probably a tall order for both of them to lose. Clearly making the playoffs would be a great deal for your program and be something you get excited about. Which situation is going to frustrate you the most if you don't make it?
There's only one situation that frustrates me, and that's the Oregon situation. I'm pretty zen about all of this because at the end of the day, this thing comes down to people's opinion. And if Texas does its job for the last 30 seconds against OU, this isn't a conversation. So Texas has only itself to blame for being put in a situation. And again, it comes down to eye tests and personal opinion. And I can't get frustrated at something that's arbitrary. I'm not going to Aaron Rodgers in 2005 and complain openly and then immediately lay an egg against Texas Tech in the bowl game while Vince was running everywhere. I will say this, though. The fact that Oregon is ahead of Texas does frustrate me for many, many reasons. One, they have a common opponent, one in which Oregon beat by 6, I think, and Texas beat by 50. Oregon has a strength of schedule somewhere in the mid 60s, and I believe Texas's strength of schedule was 9th. And Texas is likely going to win the Big 12, and Oregon is likely to win the Pac-12, but nobody respects the Pac-12 anymore as far as it being a football conference, really and truly. So if somehow Oregon gets in over Texas, I think that will be the thing that frustrates me more than, say Alabama beating Georgia and Georgia still getting in, right? Something like that, where that I think would be much easier to explain. The Oregon thing perplexes me a little bit.
Okay. I think that's fair. You brought up Aaron Rodgers, which is that level of complaining brought up great memories of A&M playing Ty Detmer in the Holiday Bowl.
Oh, man. I remember
I've got the entire week talking about how he was disappointed to have to play Texas A&M, and boy, they really should have got a bigger bowl, and we're a national championship level team, and then A&M proceeded to dislocate both of his shoulders.
I have a story about that game. I was at one of my very best friends from high school, Andy Emerson's house, watching that game, and his dad was a Longhorn fan, but we were obviously it was a bowl game it was
Sure.
on, and I think somewhere after the second separated shoulder, Andy's dad is as Texas in his blue collar as it comes, and he just said, "Welcome to Texas football, boy." And I thought that was the most badass thing I'd ever heard. As this poor guy's walking around with no arms hanging on. I mean, it was just
I mean, to Detmer's credit,
epic.
they kept popping them back in and sticking them back in
They
the
sure
game.
did, yeah. They sure did, yeah. So yeah, definitely shout out to Andy and his dad Jess because that stuck with me. It was hilarious.
Uh, Speaking of hilarious, but it's not hilarious. So I think we've wrapped that up. I don't personally think Texas is going to make the playoffs.
I
I
don't
think there's
either.
hurdles to jump. I don't think it's anything Texas fans should be disappointed about because uh, New Year's Six and the way things are currently structured is nothing to sneeze at. And if you have this exact same season next year, A, you've done it in the SEC, which is a little bit bigger deal,
Yeah,
and B, you're in the playoffs because it moves to 12 teams next year. And I'll be
yeah.
frank, I'm pretty excited based on, everybody's got the graphic. If next year's format was in place right now, what would it look like? That looks like an exciting 3 weeks of football to me. And
Yeah.
it's, I don't think it's ever going to be the level of upset that the NCAA basketball tournament is, because truly anything can happen when you have no time to prepare for an opponent that you're going
Yeah.
to play in 24 hours. I mean, there's going to be weeks between these games, but that's a lot. Everything you ask for in the regular season college football is I want to see a name ranked opponent against a name ranked opponent, and I want to see them go at it. And I can't. There's nothing bad to me about this 12 team setup that we're getting next year. Even with Tulane in it, I think that's a great opportunity for Tulane to get beat to death by Alabama or whoever they're going to play.
But you're right though, because and this is one of the few years where there isn't much of a drop off. So it would because there's been a couple of years where
Sure.
it would be kind of a stinker, but this year really is with the number of one loss teams still out there. It would be a really good, exciting couple of weeks of football where it would be everything that you'd hope for.
Yeah. So we have that to look forward to once we get past January. Something else we have to look forward to once we get past January is the SEC, or I guess ESPN leaked some notable 2024 SEC matchups.
Yeah.
And the big headline for everybody on this show, all the team that runs this show, is that on November 30th, the Saturday following Thanksgiving 2024, the Lone Star Shootout, and I really hope they come up with a better name between now and then, because I
Or
didn't
they
like
don't liberalize it and drop shootout.
their that, again, better name. I'm
Red
open
River
to
rivalry.
ideas. Right.
Red River rivalry.
The University of Texas and their Longhorns will be traveling to College Station for the first time in over a decade to play Texas A&M in Kyle Field. That is one of looks like about 12 games that SEC decided to leak early. The actual schedule release for the full season is December 13th, and they're making a whole TV show out of it. Tune in, I guess.
Yeah.
But Texas is dotted on here a couple of times. Georgia is visiting you guys. You've got Arkansas on November 16th. I know that the expectation is you're not playing Alabama again because you just played them for 2 years, but there's a lot of, and of course, the OU rivalry at the State Fair is still in play. So it'll be interesting to see where the other few games are slotted in there. But are you excited about the level of football that's
Yeah.
coming to DKR?
Yeah, and it's why I wanted Texas to move either to the SEC or the Big Ten was because I'm sorry, but I got tired of the Iowa States and I got tired of the Baylors, and I wanted to play particularly big state schools, and I wanted to play. It's funny because for as much as you and I have both been kind of indifferent about the A&M Texas game coming back, it is kind of neat that it's basically going to be on the last weekend of the regular season. And I know like there's going to be a couple of the Jethros and the Bubbas from both of our fan bases that want it played on Thanksgiving night so that no one would watch except for within the confines of the state of Texas. But yeah, I am excited about it. And what I'm excited about it too, Andy, is something we've talked about off and on going back to the BCS is like now that this is everyone's schedule, even your non-conference games should get better because there's no fear of dropping a game early in the season. Like I don't know that being undefeated is going to be the requirement that it was for the longest time. And so I think now we're just going to get really good football for a much larger run of the season than maybe we've had before.
Well, I think you might want to hold your horses on that because historically in the SEC, non-conference, you get one good game, and then you're going to play. Let's look at your schedule for next year: Colorado State, Michigan, that's your big game, and then UTSA and Louisiana Monroe. So out of conference, not as great, but I think
I think that will change though. I think you're going to see
your point. Yes,
down the road.
It will get better, but it's a it'll be a little bit because we've had the same issue for being here. It's, some of the answer is the SEC is such a grind and there's no premium for playing better games.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, with a 12-game playoff, a loss doesn't cripple your season if you have, aspirations of a national championship. So teams are willing to book better teams. You're always going to have a couple. If the SEC stays with an 8-game conference format, 2 of your 4 out of conference games are always going to be crappers. They just are because
and there should be preseason. I mean, they're preseason. Yeah. I was going to ask you though, like, now that there's a date for A&M Texas, has your feeling about the game changed? Like, are you now looking forward to it more than you were when it was just theoretical?
I mean, to be honest, I don't know that I was looking forward to it when it's theoretical.
That's what I mean. Are you now?
We haven't played you guys since 2011, and I didn't miss a lot of it. And it's not that I wouldn't enjoy watching a game with you or my friends who graduated from the University of Texas, but both of our fan bases have a certain amount of T-shirt fans that are, let's say, not hinged to reality the way most normal people are.
Right.
And so it's a little bit of a beating whether you win or lose that game, because it turns into, if you're an A&M fan, criticism about the school, criticism about your degree, criticism about the perception of the towns the college are located in versus anything to do with a football game. And exactly. I'm fine with smack talk to a degree. I don't enjoy the fake military comments that get made about the Corps of Cadets. I don't enjoy the fact that we promote the Corps of Cadets the way we do, but I am a little bit protective of the fact that the people criticizing them don't seem to understand that A&M is a senior military academy. They're one of 6 in the country.
Yeah.
And they do commission a large number of officers every year. So there is a contribution and there is a relationship between the U.S. military and A&M. So pretending that the Corps is fake army, which is
especially hearing that from people who didn't even bother to be in the fake or real army.
It gets on my nerves.
Yeah.
The sheep humpers, all that kind of stuff. Fine. I can roll with those punches, but there's some things that just aren't based in reality. I think the other thing that's going to be very interesting, and I've mentioned it before, is there is a whole host of Texas fans who have not been to Kyle Field or College Station since 2011. And I think they're going to be shocked at the level of investment that A&M has made in their program from a facility standpoint, to the point that stadium and the area surrounding the stadium, including Aggie Park, which used to be Spence Park, which now has all your tailgating and anything you could need on game day set up for you. It's just a whole different world. The indoor facility is not just a bubble sitting on the side of a highway anymore.
Whoa, that's what ours is.
And I'm not criticizing anybody's, but it is an actual building now.
Why isn't ours? Okay, whatever.
Something about an interstate. I forget the
actual. Yeah.
But we don't have to bus to a practice either, so that's a thing. We don't have our students parking at LBJ so they can walk over to the practice. Stop by the exhibit. We have a traveling jewelry show.
While you're there, yeah.
So I guess I'm happy that the rivalry's back. I don't have any issues with it being on Thanksgiving weekend. I'm glad they avoided the mistake of trying to put it on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
I was having this conversation and people wanted to gloss over it, but The game's only been played on Thanksgiving 61% of the time out of 118 meetings. And the bulk of that, 40 of those meetings were between 1918 and 1938, and then again from 1957 to some date. I don't remember the dates, but those are 40 of those meetings. Outside of that, it's always been around the weekend for the most part.
Right.
And realistically, since 1973, since that is a date Aggies love to arbitrarily pick when we're talking about our records, it has been a fairly even contest. I think Texas is ahead from that date by one game in the head-to-head. It hasn't been on Thanksgiving the majority of time for that time. And it's been fairly competitive once we got out of the 60s and once we stopped being an all-military school and once we stopped, started letting women into school, which I guess means the women are better at football than men. I'm not sure what the correlation is there, but
I'll tell you what.
that's gonna get me some hate. But no, I'm glad it's back. It remains to be seen how long I stay glad, because if y'all go on another 10-0 run on us like you did when Mac Brown was here, I'm not gonna be thrilled about it. On the contrary, if we go on a 10-11 run like we did in the 80s and 90s, I'll be thrilled.
A couple things on it. One, I'm glad the game is Saturday. My brother-in-law has been a season ticket holder forever, and so it gets stressful. I know it's lame, but it's stressful adjusting Thanksgiving plans to, particularly when you live out of town, to make sure you're in Austin every single or every other Black Friday. I want to echo your point too. One of the things that I don't like about it, that I'm not looking forward to, is these fan bases, and it's usually the people with very little actual skin in the game. It turns into Twitter before Twitter was Twitter, and I don't really want to deal with that either. We get the overly liberal comments, it's just it's all gross, and I'm hoping that it can just be I hope it can be a more fun rivalry. And I think between graduates of the school, it is. And I think it's the other people that put way more into it.
I would agree with that. And I would also say neither of us are gatekeeping in these comments. If you want to be a fan of a school, be
Absolutely,
a fan.
100%.
That's not our intent. But it's almost like the people, I'll pick on some of my history. The people in Bremont, Texas are way too invested for people who have never left the cotton fields in Bremont, Texas. Like, they'll literally be miserable for months afterwards if A&M or Texas, whoever they root for, loses that game. And I don't get that, because I can be upset about it until the next week or the bowl game if it happens to be at the end of the season, and that's okay. I don't get the people who like lose sleep over this or feel the need to go slash somebody's tires or poison trees or all the things that fan bases are known to do over rivalry games. It just gets, and maybe that's a sign that I'm getting too old to be watching college football, but it gets to be a little bit much after a while.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, I think that's right on. We're not trying to be gatekeepers, but I think the difference is I know it's a matter of degrees, but I'm stoked that the volleyball team is making the run that it is, almost to the degree that my football team is making the run. Now, obviously, there's degrees of it all, but I think whenever you love a university like we love ours, it really is a holistic thing. It isn't just, oh, I'm a Texas A&M football fan, but I'm a Kentucky basketball fan, and I'm a Louisiana baseball fan. And I know people that do that with colleges, and I don't get it. So that's,
Well, it's very easy to back winners, isn't it?
it really is.
Very easy.
Before we go, though, I do want to talk a little bit about the coaching hire has been done. You have survived the Stoops era.
It was two of the roughest hours of my life. Talking about taking things too seriously.
No, everybody, he said he was going to either cancel the show or turn it into just a Longhorn show, or he would just ask me questions. How are we feeling, though? I'm seeing a lot of positivity amongst my other Aggie friends about this being a pretty good direction for the team.
I'll put it this way. I think Mike Elko is a very good hire for the University of Texas A&M. Texas A&M University. Sorry, got mixed up there. I think that he is kind of the right man in the right place for now. He's not a splashy hire. He is not going out and pulling Jimbo Fisher from Florida State. He is not pulling Ryan Day from Ohio State, which was weirdly rumored for a while. He's a guy that we're not paying the most in college football to be our head coach, although he has the chance to earn the most with
Yeah.
his new incentive-laden contract, which I liked. But he is a guy that's very solid. And if you talk about, I don't know how high his ceiling is, I have a pretty good idea of how high his floor is. And so this should, I don't want to put pressure on it, but really starting as soon as next year could mean we move from a 7 or 8 win team to a 9 or 10 win team with with some fair consistency. Because I think the things that Jimbo did poorly towards the end are strengths that Mike Elko has. So he'll be able to address those, and I think he's willing to address those. He's not a guy nearing 60 who has decided that this is the way you win games, and I'm not ever going to deviate from this. He is, despite the way he looks, 46. I mean, it's almost a Wilford Brimley sort of thing in Cocoon when you go, what? He was 22? How is that possible? But he was. The Golden Girls are all 18. Who knew?
I think the good thing for you guys with this hire, it's not dissimilar to the Sark hire, though they obviously came from different directions. But I think somebody hungry to make that name for himself versus coming in already having the name, I think it makes all the difference. I think clearly there's talent on the campus, and we've seen it before where just a slight difference in point of view from a coaching staff can make all the difference in the outcome.
Well, we saw it last year, and not to, we're not pitting our hopes on a successful season being this, but Sonny Dykes walked into a very similar situation at TCU last year. You have a team that's got a lot of talent that was kind of rudderless for a little bit under Gary Patterson, that all of a sudden a new coaching staff came in, made some key portal additions, recruited well, and in one season was in the playoffs. And that's, with moving to 12, I don't want to say it'd be the disappointment if you don't make the playoffs, but we should have a pretty good shot at making the playoffs, with a few things falling our way. His big job right now is going to be to retain the roster he has with a little attrition, little important attrition. There's going to be some attrition. He's got to hold on to the recruiting class and augment it, both in the upcoming December 13th, whatever that Tuesday is, early signing day, and then again in February. And if you see his approach being successful, you'll see some guys who are committed to other schools that just don't commit anywhere on the early signing day, which means that he's at least getting them to listen. Now, maybe that doesn't result in a signing, but that's kind of the first step, is rebuilding some of those relationships, because the recruiting area did change when you moved to North Carolina. It's a different world.
Yeah.
The good news is he comes in only 2 years removed from A&M. He's very well thought of from the Texas High School Football Coaches Association, which evidently is a thing we need to care about because they hated Jimbo, and high school football coaches in Texas are very important, according to them. I am not a fan.
Well, we've spent many hours on our show talking about some of the problems of Texas, of the Texas high school football culture.
The acknowledging the need for those relationships and not pretending they don't need to exist. I think Elko is ahead of the game on that. To that point, the association is, pretty happy that he's come back, because it's another opportunity for them to put kids in programs that are major football programs. So there's a lot of work to be done right now. We're all clamoring to see who the offensive coordinator is, and all hoping for somebody weirdly progressive that runs an offense that throws for 1 million yards, runs for 1 million yards, and never turns the ball over. So if you know a guy, that's what we're shooting for.
I'll keep my eyes open.
Something karmically right about Texas hiring Steve Sarkisian, who had to kind of rebuild himself, but came up as an offensive coordinator, reestablished himself under Nick Saban, and Texas being an offensive team, and A&M going the opposite way and hiring a defensive guy. Whether or not he's running the defense, and I don't think he will be. I think he's going to be the kind of coach that hires a defensive coordinator and lets him run the defense.
Mm-hmm.
There's something karmically right about that juxtaposition. That's and we've tried hiring offensive coaches for the past 3 hires, and it hasn't been 4 hires. It hasn't been great.
Have you tried hiring former alcoholics or alcoholics that are recovering alcoholics?
If this doesn't work, we're going to be just trying to hire special teams guys. We just want somebody with a great special teams background. Maybe Jeff Banks can come back.
Maybe,
He can bring his monkey and his wife, girlfriend, whatever. I don't know what she is.
you know, you got to get Bill Bates to come and like be the special teams
100%.
coordinator. Yeah,
Billy
do it.
White
Why
Shoes
not?
Johnson is hanging around Houston. Maybe he can.
Maybe he can throw in. It's gonna be fun, man. It's gonna be fun.
All right. So I think that wraps us up. Want to wish good luck to you on the game tomorrow. I don't think you're necessarily going to need it. I'm sure if anything goes wrong, I'll be getting messages or texts.
Oh yeah.
But I don't anticipate that's actually going to happen. And it is a lovely brunch game at 11 in the morning, as the Big 12 does. I'm going to miss the big 11 a.m. Just
Yeah, that's of course now when they lose Texas and OU, it'll be Friday at 11 a.m.
That is interesting to me, though, because as I was looking at these key games, and then I look at Texas's football schedule for next year, Oklahoma doesn't have a date on it yet.
Yeah, and I don't know, hopefully SEC is smart enough to keep the whole state fair thing a thing, but hopefully they'll do that. But
yeah, it's something for us to watch. Everybody assumes, at least this year, that this is, the schedule is going to be, and y'all will be at the state fair the second Saturday in October, like you do every year. But I guess there's room for wiggle, because there is the potential that SEC moves to a 9-game schedule in 2025, and then all this starts over. So we'll see how that goes. But I just thought it was interesting on the Texas website. Oklahoma doesn't have it's TBA right now. Hey, and you do get to play Florida and Kentucky and Mississippi State and Vanderbilt. So there's that.
Hey, I'm excited about that. But I'm excited to be doing this with you next year.
You should be excited about playing Vanderbilt. It's a fun game.
I'm looking forward to it.
Get to see some of the guys. You go, hey, they're still on the roster. That's neat. It's a real big deal.
Can we make the same joke we make with Rice? Like, after we beat you, can you please give us a job?
Yes, 100%.
100%.
All right, that wraps us up for Lone Star Yell and Fight. I'm Andy. That is James. It's Friday. Enjoy your Saturdays. Enjoy your playoff, your championship weekend, and we will see you again next week.